Hey y'all, I'm Rylan. Welcome to my channel. I'm here today with another part to my book review series where I take a couple of minutes to deep dive into a single book that I've read and review it on my channel for y'all. I love writing book reviews and kind of swapping into a video format for reviews for some of the books that I read has been very fun to do this year, and I'm excited to be back with my newest installment of this series. I'll be doing this hopefully as well in 2025 with some of the books that I read, and I just think it's a very fun time to be able to kind of dive into the books that I read a little bit more so than I do in vlogs or wrap-up videos or things like that. As you saw in the title or thumbnail, the book that I'll be reviewing today is The Night We Lost Him by Laura Dave. This book came out on October 1st of this year from Simon & Schuster and has very quickly gotten very popular. The author's most recent book, which was The Last Thing He Told Me, has recently become a TV show, I guess, and was also very popular, so I knew I really wanted to read this one, especially after giving her last book 5 stars. I could not wait to get my hands on a copy of this one. I actually found an ARC for the price of shipping, so very excited to have gotten that. I do kind of wish I had a finished copy of it just because some of the quotes in here are beautiful and I would love to make sure that they're accurate to the final copy, but that's okay. Love my copy of this book and I'm very happy to have it on my shelves. I did also tab this book so I could have some notes for the video, and I think they just kind of match the cover so well and make this book feel so loved. Not that I'm going to give away my rating quite yet, because before that we're going to go ahead and talk about the synopsis for this one. This is tagged as a mystery, but it's also so much more than that. I would almost combine it with contemporary fiction as well. It is about a very wealthy man who had a resort empire kind of, and he passes away kind of suspiciously. He falls off a cliff, but his son is convinced that there's no way that he could have just fallen off the cliff at this place where he spent so much of his time at, and he brings his half-sister into the story as well and tries to get her to come with him to kind of figure out what the mystery is behind their father's death and if it was actually an accident or if he was potentially pushed or murdered or something suspicious was done to him leading up to his death. So we follow Nora's perspective. She is Liam's daughter, his first child, and we follow her throughout this timeline of a month after her father's death to solving the mystery about his death, or solving what really happened leading up to his death. And then we also follow the past with Liam's perspective and kind of this very powerful relationship that he had with somebody, and how that past relationship ended up playing a part in the present time and all the things that happened leading up to his passing away. So we're very much tangled in this web of past versus present and characters who are tangled together, and the picture's not clear until the end, but it's so worth it to wait for that, if that makes sense. I'll go ahead and give the content warnings for this book before I jump into my ratings. Content warnings for The Night We Lost Him do include death of parent, cheating, death, grief, alcohol, medical content, suicidal thoughts, and heart attack. So definitely check those out. I'll have them in my description down below as well, as per usual. But I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Very much could have been 5 stars, and I'll kind of jump into my big reason why it wasn't quite 5 stars for me in a couple of minutes when I talk about the characters. But I did really enjoy this book and would very much recommend it, especially if you're looking for a mystery that's so much more than a mystery, that has extremely beautiful writing and is also very sad at times, but also very beautiful. You get such a mesh of things with this book, and I would very much recommend it. I do my book reviews in the order of plot, characters, and then overall thoughts at the very end. So kind of diving into the plot here, this is a very slow burn mystery. It's also very much a contemporary fiction novel, I would say. So it's very slow burn as we're following these 2 timelines, as I've mentioned in the synopsis portion of this video. We're following Nora in the present time as she's trying to figure out what happened to her dad and all of his past things, and we're also following Liam, who is the father, in the past from high school into college into adult life, and just the person that meant the most to him. There is a lot of mystery surrounding both the present and the past, because in the past timeline, we're not really given all of the context surrounding the two characters, and in the present timeline there's a lot of vagueness because Nora and her brother Sam obviously don't know everything about their father, and so there's a lot of very vague things that happen or very vague comments that it's kind of hard to know the full picture, of course, until you get to the very end. So there is a lot of waiting when it comes to the plot. Do I think the waiting is worth it? Yes, but there is very much a potential for frustration because there is so much unknown until you get to the last couple of chapters of the book. I would also argue that this book is more of a character study than a plot-heavy novel, which is interesting because a lot of mysteries are more plot-heavy, I think, but I personally find this book to be more character-driven, very much a character study about Nora herself, but also her father and her brother, and their characters obviously make up this plot and the mystery of finding out what happened to their father on the night that he died, but you also very much get in depth into their characters. I'll kind of dive into that in a minute, but I do think that the plot is kind of overshadowed, not in a bad way, by the characters in the end. Although there are some very interesting plot twists in this book, there were a couple of moments when I gasped. I think I was reading this book at the pond at the lake yesterday. My boyfriend was fishing and I was just trying to finish up my book, and I was like, one, I was crying, I had tears streaming down my face, but also I was gasping from some of the plot twists that we hit in the last several chapters of the book. And so there is very much a suspenseful feeling to the plot, but again, this is also a character study, and so the plot and the characters, the balance between them is very much shifted, with the characters kind of overshadowing the plot. But I think it all worked out. I think the balance ended up striking in a very nice way. It's not as fast-paced as I had expected it would be when I first picked up the book and started diving into it, but the emotionally impactful writing in the story made up for that for me. I think a slow burn mystery is kind of what I needed because it gave me the space to cry, because it was so much more than a mystery and the plot was so much more than just figuring out what happened to somebody on the night that they died, and it dove into so much more. And I think that the slow burn element was very necessary in the end. It could be a boring book for some people. I can see that happening. I'm not sure if people are feeling that way about this one. So just don't expect a super fast-paced, intense thriller mystery. Expect more of a slow burn character study with a mystery intertwined among the characters. In regard to the characters, this is kind of where my 5-star anticipation rating for this book kind of dropped down to 4 stars, because there is very much a distance that is built between the characters and the reader. And I honestly think that it's a very intentional move to make, but it also grew a little bit frustrating because there was never really a time when I truly felt like I knew the characters until the very end. So you get this character study, you get all these very deep dives into these characters, but you don't know the full pictures until the very end. And for me, I felt very distanced from them at times, and it was frustrating because I just felt like I couldn't quite get to know them all the way, and I don't quite know how to put that feeling into words, but the best word that I can use is that word distance. And so I kind of felt distanced from the characters, especially Nora at times, as well as her father and his perspective timeline, but I just couldn't quite get my feet all the way into the story in those elements because I just felt like there was some gap that couldn't be bridged between myself and the characters. I do feel like this could be a very intentional move though, because by the end of this book, I didn't necessarily feel that way anymore. I mean, I was crying over these characters, I was crying over what happened to them, and I can see that this could be an intentional move to kind of create distance and bridge that gap in the very end, but for 250 pages, I kind of kept going back and forth with this grappling between wanting to know the characters, but knowing that like I couldn't quite get all the way there. And again, that feeling is so hard to describe, but I felt it, if that makes sense. I felt this distance between myself and the characters. Yet also by the end, I was satisfied with what we do end up learning and figuring out about Nora, our female main character who we follow in the present timeline, Liam, our male father main character that we follow in the past, as well as Sam's character, who we kind of dive into from Nora's perspective. So I felt very satisfied with all of that by the very end, but for most of the book that distance was present, and it's very clear that because the characters are grappling with so much, including their own identities, that we couldn't quite get to know them all the way, and so that distance is kind of built between the readers and the characters. So that was like the most frustrating part of this book for me, but by the end of the book I did feel like everything was okay. I felt good about the direction that the book went and the things that happened, and getting to know the characters. It just kind of took a very long time to get to that bridge between the gap of myself and the characters. So that was like the hardest part of this book for me to kind of wrestle with, but overall worth it in the end. Still gave it 4 stars, still really enjoyed it. My overall thoughts for this book really just include 4 bullet points. The first one is, this is a very quick read. The Night We Lost Him is like 292 pages and the audiobook is less than 8 hours long. So very quick read in that aspect, which I can never complain about, especially from someone who has been reading some pretty long books recently. I did appreciate that element of this book. It packed a punch in a shorter format than a lot of books that I've read recently, which was very nice. I also thought that this book included some of the most beautiful writing that I have read in a very, very long time. I would read some of the quotes from this book, but I can't quite check them against the finished copy of the book, so I don't want to read any potential like untrue lines, especially because also it says, please do not quote for publication without checking against the finished book. And I don't have access to a finished book right now, but I can tell you that I know that the writing is beautiful, and there are definitely some very tear-worthy quotes in here because I was crying as I was reading this one. So that is definitely a beautiful element to this book. I think that also that kind of ties into the fact that I feel like this is so much more than just a mystery. I did mention the idea of this potentially being a contemporary fiction novel as well, with a mystery included in it, but it's not just your stereotypical like introduction action that sets off a mystery into the rising plot action, into the climax, into the resolution at the end of the book, but you get such a deep study of characters and character sketches in this book that it's not just a mystery. It's a love story, it's a heartbreak story, it's a mystery, it's a murder, but you also have so much more going on in this one, and it made me cry. So that's really all I need to say about it in the end, is that it made me cry, because books that make me cry I think are just so impactful and really speak to the power of words and how they're put together. And in this book they're just so beautiful and so heartbreaking that I just couldn't help but be emotionally impacted by what I was reading. So 4 stars to Laura Dave. My throat has been super scratchy today, and so I've been coughing a lot, so I feel like this video is super choppy, but it's fine. I did end up really enjoy reading The Night We Lost Him. I just finished it last night, or yesterday afternoon I guess, and was crying throughout the end of the book, and I did not want it to finish, but also I felt very satisfied by what we ended up getting at the end of this book. So 4 stars to this one. Would recommend it. It is recently released as of October 1st, so it's been over 2 months now I guess since it came out, and I think it's getting some pretty good reviews and ratings from the general public, but I personally really enjoyed this one and would recommend it to y'all as well. If you have read this book or any other book by Laura Dave, please feel free to comment down below and let me know what your thoughts were on any of those books. I'd love to hear them. Or if you plan to read this one, feel free to share that with me in the comments as well. But that's all that I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.